So we've previously talked about Mendel's experiments on these pea plants to see how traits were passed on from parents to offspring. And here's a chart of 7 different traits that those pea plants had that made them different from each other. And through Mendel's experiments, he found out that there were dominant traits and that there were recessive traits. So for instance, for flower color, there were 2 different versions or alleles, and he found out that purple flowers were dominant to white flowers. Or let's say seed shape. There were 2 different versions or alleles. It's either round or wrinkled seed. And he found out that round seeds were dominant to wrinkled seeds. So this is a type of pattern. We call it inheritance pattern, and it's called complete dominance. Inheritance pattern just means it's a pattern where traits are passed on from parents to offspring. Now specifically, we call this type of pattern complete dominance. When we see complete dominance, we see that one trait is totally dominant over the other trait. So for instance, plant height. There's 2 different versions and one trait is totally dominant over the other. Tall is dominant over short. The thing is, not all traits act like that. What happens if one allele is not completely dominant over the other? Or what if there is a gene where it has many alleles, not just 2 versions, but many? For instance, eye color. There's not just 2 alleles or versions, there are many different types of eye color. Or skin color too. There's not just 2 versions or alleles for skin color, there's many versions or alleles for skin color. So today what we're going to be taking a look at are other types of inheritance patterns that don't follow Mendel's rules of complete dominance, where there's only 2 versions, 2 alleles, and one is dominant to the other. So this inheritance pattern we're going to look at today is called incomplete dominance, and this happens in certain flowers. Okay, so in this case, this flower color, there's a red version, there's a white version, white flowers, but now instead of just having red or white, we have a 3rd version or allele, and it's pink. So in this case, both of the parents' traits, they're blended in the offspring. So if, let's say here we have one parent that's red, one parent that's white, the offspring is not just going to be red or not just going to be white, it's going to be a blending of the 2 parents' traits. Okay, why does this happen? It's because one allele or one version is not completely dominant over the other. Red is not dominant or white's not dominant. They're not dominant over the other one. So in this case, they blend in, the parent traits blend in the offspring. So that's what my memory clue is. So you think blend in, and the in you can think of as incomplete dominance. Okay, the parent's traits, they blend or they mix in the offspring. Now, like I said, that's the example. Red flower and a white flower, they blend the colors together to make the pink flower in the offspring. Now you can think of this as like paint. When you mix red paint and white paint, you don't just get all red paint. You don't just get all white paint. What do you get? You get a blend of the 2 colors. You get pink. So when you think of incomplete dominance, you think the parents' traits are blending in the offspring. So because of this, we're going to have to do our Punnett squares a little bit differently. We're going to have to look at it a little bit differently since we don't just have 2 alleles or traits and one's not dominant over the other. So what are we going to do? Well, for each trait that we're going to see, we're going to represent it by a different letter. And the alleles or letters that we're going to use, let's just capitalize all of them because one trait is not dominant completely over another trait. So let's just make them all capitalized letters. So let's look at that example with the red and white flowers. The allele or letter for red flowers, okay, let's make it R for red flowers, and we're going to capitalize it because neither trait is dominant. Now, for white flowers, remember we said that each trait gets a different letter. So in this case, let's make it, for white flowers, let's make it W. And we're going to capitalize it again because neither trait is dominant over the other. Now, let's take a look at the genotype. Remember, genotype means two alleles or letters. What would it be for pink flowers? Now, remember, in order to get pink, we needed to make sure there was red and white as a blending in of the traits. So we got to take both of these letters. So the genotype, the two letters to make pink flowers, is going to be R and W, because it gets one letter from the red flower parent and one letter or allele from the white flower plant. So let's go ahead and do an example with a Punnett square. So let's say we had the red flower and we crossed it with the white flower. Cross just means like they reproduce. Well, let's take a look at the parent's genotype. So parent 1, the genotype for red flower. Now remember, genotype means two alleles or letters. Now we already said that red flower is R, so I'm going to just need two R's, and they're both capitalized. What about the white flower? That parent, what is its genotype? Now remember, white flower is represented by the allele W, but I want a genotype. I want two letters, so let's make it WW, and they're both capitalized. Now if you see, these are both, we're going to say homozygous. Why? Because they're both the same. Now, we're not going to say homozygous dominant. We're not going to say homozygous recessive because there's not a dominant and there's not a recessive. We're just going to say homozygous. So we're going to fill in the Punnett square now. Now remember, in the Punnett square, one parent goes on the top and one parent goes on the side. So we're going to have RR for one of the parents, and that's red flower. We have WW on the left side, and that's for white flower. And what you're going to do is just do the same thing. You're going to fill in the inside of the Punnett square to see what the next offspring might turn out to be. Now, in this box, we're going to have one parent gave an R, one parent gave a W, so you're just filling that out, RW. In this box, same thing. One parent gives an R, one gives a W. And the same goes for these two boxes. One parent gives the R, one parent gives the W, and then the last one parent gives an R, one parent gives a W. Now, we would write it as RW. How we would say the genotype is, it's heterozygous. Why is this heterozygous? Because these two alleles are different from each other. So, what is the next offspring's ratio going to be in terms of genotype? Now there's only one version of the genotype that the next offspring can be. It's RW, and it happens 4 out of the 4 boxes, or 100%. Now what about the phenotype? Remember, phenotype means the physical trait. So what does RW represent as a color? Now we said over here RW represents pink flowers. So each one of these will represent pink flowers. And that would be the phenotype of the next offspring. Pink flowers would happen 4 out of the 4 boxes, or 100% of the time. So let's do another example. So here we have two pink flowers and they're crossed. The question is, what are the genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring? And this time I'm only asking for fractions. I don't want percents. So remember, now the parents are pink. And we said pink flowers would be represented as RW. So parent 1's genotype is RW. The other parent's genotype is also RW. So filling in the Punnett square, on the top is going to be one parent. On the side, another parent. And you're just going to fill in the boxes. So in this box here, we have one parent giving the R allele and the other parent giving the other R allele. And we say this is a homozygous genotype. Remember, we're not saying homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive. It's just homozygous because they're the same alleles. Now, RR, what phenotype or color does that represent? And we said R represents red flowers and it has 2 of them, so it's going to have the red flower trait. Let's take a look at this box. One parent gives the R allele, the other parent gives a W allele, so we have this RW. And remember, this is heterozygous. Why? Because these two alleles or letters are different. And RW, what phenotype or trait does that represent? We said RW represents pink. All right, in this box here, one parent gives an R, one parent gives a W, and again, it's heterozygous. And what color is that? What phenotype is it? It's pink. And then here we have one parent gives a W, the other parent gives a W. So this genotype, we're going to say it's homozygous because it's the same alleles. And then what phenotype is this represented by? It is a white flower. So let's write the genotypes and phenotypes in fractions. I don't want percent, just fractions. Well, I see there are three different combinations of letters, three different genotypes. RR I see happening 1 out of the 4 boxes. RW I see happening in 2 of the 4 boxes. And WW I see in 1 of the 4 boxes. Now phenotypes, the physical traits, that means the colors, I see 3 different colors here. I see red flower, it happens in 1 out of the 4 boxes. Our pink flowers, which is happening in 2 of the 4 boxes. And then white flower, which is happening in 1 of the 4 boxes. So when you look at a Punnett square, you're going to have to figure out if it's going to be taking like an incomplete dominance. And there's 2 different clues to help you figure out if it is using that type of inheritance pattern. One clue is if you see 3 different phenotypes. So remember, for the flower color, there was red flowers, there was white flowers, and then there was a third version, there was pink flowers. Another clue that will help you think, that will help you see if a Punnett square problem is talking about incomplete dominance, is if there's a blending in of traits. So remember, the memory clue is blend in, incomplete. So remember, we have the red and the white flowers, and then they were blending in to make the pink flowers. Now, incomplete dominance is not just showing in certain colors for, let's say, flowers. It could also be shown in, let's say, something like hair texture. So let's see, one parent has, let's say, curly hair, the other parent has straight hair. Now, their offspring that they produce, it's not like half of the head is going to be straight and half is going to be curly. It's going to have a mixture or a blend of those 2 hair textures. So they would produce offspring that have wavy hair. So if we were to write down the alleles for each trait, so for curly hair, we would write it as C for curly, and we're going to make it capitalized, right? Because curly is not dominant. All right, and then for straight hair, we're going to write the allele as a capital S, because remember, we need a different letter, and also we're going to make it a capital letter because neither curly nor straight, neither one is dominant over the other. Well, what about the genotype for people who have wavy hair? Now remember, in order to get wavy hair, you have to have one parent that has curly hair and one parent that has straight hair. So you need these 2 letters for the genotype. So the genotype, the 2 letters would be CS. Okay, so let's do an example together. What are the genotypes and phenotypes of offspring whose parents have curly hair and the other parent has wavy hair? So curly hair, remember, it has we already figured out what the genotype is, which is CC. And then for the other parent that has wavy hair, we already found out the genotype for wavy hair is CS. So you're going to put the Punnett square together. One parent's genotype goes on the top of the Punnett square. One parent's genotype goes on the left. And you're just going to fill in the boxes. So in this box, one parent gives a C allele, the other parent gives a C allele. And same thing on this box next to it. One parent gives a C allele, the other parent gives a C allele. And these 2 boxes are the same. One parent gives a C allele, and then one parent gives an S. And it's the same for the next box. Okay? So I didn't ask for the genotype or phenotype to be in percent or fraction. So you can pick which one, you can pick both. But for genotype, I see 2 different genotypes that the offspring can have. So the offspring has a 2 out of 4 or 50% chance of having a genotype of CC or homozygous C. And then a 50% chance or 2 out of 4 chance of having a heterozygous genotype, or CS. For phenotype, there's two different phenotypes. So there's curly hair, so 2 out of 4 or 50% chance of having curly hair, and then CS represents the phenotype of wavy hair. So it's going to be 2 out of 4 or 50% wavy hair. So I want you to do this example on your own. If two parents have wavy hair, what are the genotypes and phenotypes of their offspring? So because both parents have wavy hair, and we already figured out that wavy hair is CS, parent 1 and parent 2 genotype would be CS, or heterozygous. So when you put the Punnett square together, each parent goes on the top, either side, either on the top or the left-hand side. And when you fill out the boxes, it should look like this. So I didn't ask for specific genotypes or phenotypes to be in percent or fraction, so you could put both or you could put one or the other. So the genotype, I see one combination of CC or homozygous, so it's 1 out of 4 or 25%. I see 2 boxes out of 4 boxes that have heterozygous or CS, and 1 out of 4 of the boxes which is homozygous for S, or 25%. For phenotype, the hair texture, well, this genotype represents curly hair, so it's in 1 out of the 4 boxes, or 25%. The genotype CS represents the phenotype of wavy hair, so that's 2 out of 4 or 50%. And SS represents the phenotype for straight hair, which is 1 out of 4 or 25%. So we're going to take a look at one last inheritance pattern, and it's called multiple alleles. And it's when you have a gene that has more than 2 alleles, or letters. So for a blood type, there are 3 different alleles. There's A, B, and O. So that's an example of multiple alleles because it has more than just 2 alleles or letters to represent the different types of, in this case, blood type.